At the peak of the post-pandemic boom, dealers gambled everything, convinced outboard engines would keep soaring in value. In a single season, setups worth $90,000 crashed to just $20,000, wiping out savings, destroying businesses, and flooding auctions with barely used machines. How did a seemingly unstoppable market collapse overnight? And could anyone have seen the chain reaction coming? The answer begins with a surge that felt like it would last forever, until it didn't. Orders poured in faster than factories could keep up. In 2021, United States outboard sales soared past 330,000 units, the highest total in decades. Assembly lines ran at over 95% capacity, and some manufacturers increased output by 50% just to chase demand. It was a pace that left no room for error. Every shift, every hour, every worker was stretched to the limit. Mechanics at coastal dealers began their days before sunrise, prying open crates in the parking lot and unboxing engines while the morning air was thick with humidity. One mechanic described it as Christmas morning every morning with no end in sight. This was a boom. Dealerships became nerve centers of activity. Trucks lined up at loading docks, and shipments that once came monthly now arrived every week, sometimes every day. The volume was staggering. Rows of outboards stood like sentinels, waiting for buyers who seemed to appear as soon as engines hit the floor. For a while, it felt like there could never be enough to satisfy the rush. Families who had never owned a boat before were suddenly signing up for waiting lists, eager to pay whatever it took to get on the water. The atmosphere was pure mania. Price tags reflected the mania. A 150 horsepower outboard that sold for $13,000 just a few years earlier now commanded $25,000 or more. High-end setups stretched into the $80,000 to $90,000 range, and still the phones rang nonstop. Dealers watched as monthly payments doubled or tripled, but buyers kept coming, convinced that prices could only go higher. The sense of urgency was everywhere. Salespeople hustled to lock in deposits, promising delivery dates they could barely guarantee. Mechanics raced to rig boats, sometimes working through lunch and late into the evening, just to keep up with the backlog. Prices rose like a tide. Manufacturers responded by ramping up production even further. Some expanded shifts, others added new lines, all chasing numbers that broke records quarter after quarter. The National Marine Manufacturers Association called it a historic boom, a surge unmatched since before the Great Recession. On paper, the industry looked unstoppable. Each new delivery felt like proof the growth was permanent, that the market had changed for good. But beneath the surface, the pressure was building. Warehouses filled to bursting, dealers faced impossible choices about how much to order, and the first cracks in the system began to appear, hidden in the rush and waiting for the next decision to push them wider. Pressure mounted. Dealers across the country found themselves locked into a dangerous game of numbers. Manufacturers dangled incentives and rebates, but those perks came with strings attached. Each year, the minimum order quotas crept higher. If a dealer hesitated, if they ordered less than the target, they risked losing their allocation the following season. In a market where demand once outstripped supply, that threat was enough to keep orders flowing, even as showrooms and warehouses filled past capacity. The pressure didn't just come from above. Sales reps warned that shrinking orders could lead to being cut off entirely. For many dealers, the calculus was simple. Take 2 times or even 3 times their usual inventory, or risk being left with nothing to sell when the next wave of buyers arrived. Some managers called it a use it or lose it scenario, and no one wanted to be caught short. The result was a surge of engines and boats arriving in bulk, far more than any one dealership could reasonably expect to move. Inside the warehouses, the overflow became impossible to ignore. Pallets stacked with outboards blocked aisles and clogged loading docks. Mechanics squeezed past crates just to reach their workbenches. In some regions, dealers were holding 2 to 3 times their normal inventory, with new shipments arriving before the last batch had even been unwrapped. The back rooms, once used for service parts or customer storage, now held rows of engines still in their factory wrapping, tags from the last delivery barely disturbed. The contracts left little room for negotiation. Purchase minimums were spelled out in black and white, and the threat of losing next year's supply hung over every decision. Even as the buying frenzy cooled, dealers kept ordering, hoping the rush would return before the next audit. Some tried creative tactics, swapping allocations with other stores or shifting inventory to satellite locations, but the numbers kept climbing. By early 2024, warehouse managers in coastal cities reported inventory levels at historic highs, with some locations holding more stock than in the previous 2 years combined. Every engine sitting on the floor came with a cost. Dealers knew those motors were not just metal and plastic. They were tied to financing agreements, accruing interest by the day. The more engines on hand, the heavier the debt load became. Yet the system offered no off-ramp. To play the game, you had to keep buying. And as the warehouses overflowed, the trap snapped shut. The next reckoning would come not from the sales floor, but from the balance sheets, where every unsold engine was now a liability waiting to be called in. Interest rates began their climb in early 2022, but the real pain arrived months later, buried in the fine print of every floor plan loan agreement. For years, dealers had grown used to borrowing at around 4%. Inventory costs were manageable, even with warehouses packed wall to wall. But by 2024, rates had tripled. A dealer carrying $1.5 million in engines now faced monthly interest bills of $15,000 to $21,000. Just 2 years earlier, that same line cost $5,000 a month. The difference was not just a rounding error, it was the margin between profit and insolvency. Curtailments added another layer of pressure. Every 90 days, lenders demanded 10% of the original loan principal on every unit still sitting unsold. Miss a payment, and the bank could freeze the line or demand immediate repayment. For dealers with aging inventory, the calendar became a threat. Each quarter brought another round of mandatory paydowns, draining cash reserves even as sales slowed. The math was relentless. A mid-sized store with $2.5 million in stock had to come up with $250,000, then another $250,000 30 days later if those engines did not move. Cash that might have gone to payroll, advertising, or service instead disappeared into lender accounts. A chief financial officer for a major regional dealership described the numbers in stark terms. In 2021, interest and curtailment combined to about $8,000 a month, a manageable nuisance. By spring of 2024, the monthly burden topped $30,000, with curtailments alone draining 6 figures each quarter. Sales had not collapsed yet, but the store's cash flow turned negative. Even profitable locations found themselves squeezed, forced to sell below cost just to keep up with the next curtailment. The more inventory on hand, the faster the spiral. Automated systems tracked every serial number, every payment, every day past due. There was no room for delay or negotiation. Lenders debited accounts directly, sometimes with no warning. A single missed curtailment could trigger a chain reaction, a line freeze, default interest, and an immediate audit. For some, the end came not with a warning, but with a locked portal and a phone call that the bank had pulled the plug. Even dealers with strong sales and solid reputations found themselves on the edge, unable to keep up with the math. The system that once fueled growth now threatened to wipe out everything they had built, one monthly statement at a time. Dealers arrived at work expecting another day of juggling bills and moving engines, only to find their credit portals locked and their lines of credit frozen without warning. Some discovered the truth when their inventory management screens refused to load. or when automated payment requests bounced back with error codes. The digital locks were absolute. No new draws, no refinancing, no way to shift stock or buy breathing room. Phones lit up with confused calls from sales reps and frantic texts from general managers. The message was short. The bank had pulled the plug. Within hours, the crisis moved from spreadsheets to the showroom floor. Lenders dispatched representatives to tag engines still in their factory wrap, inventory that had never even reached a customer. Liquidators arrived with clipboards and asset lists, moving methodically through rows of untouched outboards. Some dealers watched as their most expensive stock was cataloged for auction, each serial number scanned and logged for removal. The process was impersonal, clinical, brand new engines, some with 0 hours, stripped of their retail price tags and reassigned as distressed assets. Anecdotes spread quickly. One dealer in the Southeast described logging in to find a red banner across his portal that read, "Account access suspended, contact lender." Another recounted how within minutes of a missed curtailment, a third-party liquidator was at the door, preparing to haul away inventory worth millions at last year's prices. Staff members who had spent months unboxing engines now found themselves boxing them back up for shipment to auction warehouses. The effect was immediate and public. What had been a private struggle, balancing interest payments, negotiating with lenders, praying for a sales rebound, became a spectacle. Auction notices appeared online, listing engines by the dozen, 2023 models, low hours, all must go. Dealers who had once competed for allocation now competed to see whose stock would be liquidated first. Some tried to negotiate, offering to pay down loans or swap collateral, but the decisions were automated. Portals stayed locked, and the only path forward was liquidation. The sense of control vanished. Years of relationships with banks, manufacturers, and customers counted for nothing against the algorithms that triggered the freeze. Floor managers scrambled to reassure staff, but the reality was plain. When the credit line snapped, the market's safety net disappeared. Engines that had been assets on Monday were liabilities by Friday, and every dealer knew the price discovery process would now play out in public at auction blocks and liquidation sales, where the true value of their inventory would be set for all to see. Bidding opened on a Thursday morning, and within minutes the numbers told an unmistakable story no one could ignore. A lot of outboards with a retail value of $480,000 hammered for just $162,000. Rows of engines, still wrapped in their factory plastic, lined up for the auction block, 2023 models, barely used, offered in bulk. Dealers and brokers stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on screens as prices tumbled. A 250 horsepower engine that fetched $21,000 last summer barely broke $7,000. Mid-range motors that once sold for $16,000 went for less than $5,000, some dipping below $10,000, even for nearly new units. The sell-through rate topped 90%. Almost every engine found a buyer, no matter the loss. Auction managers described the pace as relentless. They said they had never seen consignors this desperate. Reserve prices were gone. The only goal was to clear the floor and get out from under the debt. Exporters snapped up lots by the dozen, loading containers bound for South America and West Africa. Domestic dealers tried to hold the line, but the floor kept dropping. Each hammer set a new benchmark, and within days, retail listings across the country slashed their prices to match. The free fall was absolute. High-end setups that carried $90,000 price tags just months earlier now sold for $20,000 or less. The auction floor became the new price guide, and anyone holding inventory at yesterday's values was left stranded. In a single week, the entire market was repriced in public, with no room for denial and no time to adjust. For many, the shock was not just financial, it was existential. The era of ever-rising values was over, and the liquidation hammer left nothing untouched. Owners who once felt secure with their new boats and engines now faced a different reality. Loan balances towered over resale values, trapping thousands in negative equity. For many, the numbers no longer made sense. A setup bought for $80,000 in 2023 might fetch $28,000 on the open market, while the bank still demanded payments on the original sum. Charter captains and families alike tried to sell, only to discover buyers vanished or offers landed tens of thousands below what they owed. Some walked away, leaving lenders to repossess engines with less than 100 hours on the meter. Others kept paying, month after month, on loans that would never catch up to the market. Repossession trucks became a regular sight at marinas. Engines disappeared from slips overnight, sometimes after just a year or two of use. Mechanics who had spent years rigging new boats now found themselves unbolting them, preparing for auction or storage. One veteran technician described the mood as worse than 2008. At least back then, you could see it coming. Dealerships and marinas, once bustling, emptied out. Some closed their doors for good, unable to survive the double blow of lost sales and mounting debt. Job postings vanished, and longtime employees packed up their toolboxes, uncertain where to go next. The shock rippled through coastal towns, leaving behind shuttered buildings and unfinished projects. For those who had staked their livelihoods on the promise of permanent growth, the collapse felt personal, a reminder that even the strongest surges can leave devastation in their wake. Today, thousands of outboards sit unsold, their values erased in months. As dealers and buyers navigate the fallout, one fact is clear. When finance and speculation outpace real demand, collapse happens fast, and few are spared. The marine market shockwaves still ripple outward, a warning that even prized assets can become liabilities overnight. What safeguards will protect the next wave? Let me know your thoughts below.